India has a huge amount of scale, and there's quite a bit of a focus in India, in banking sectors and tech.
Why Cockroach?
Impressive thing about cockroaches is definitely that they're hard to kill. So that's actually why it's named that. It's the survivable database.
If you would go on a dinner date with a particular CEO, who would that be?
I mean, it's not going to be a very original answer, but Elon Musk.
Your vision in terms of all the AI advancement that are happening?
AI in general, it's getting cheaper. There's less a need for massive quantities of data, more for the quality, more for how the model works.
In Bangalore and India, that's the only talk that everyone's having.
Wow, people are spending trillions of dollars on the data centers and the GPUs, and nobody's making $1 trillion except for NVIDIA's doing quite well there, right? But the total amount spent and the total amount made, there's a vast delta there.
Would you like to go back as a coder, or would you like to be a CEO and running the business successfully?
One of the best ways to start a company is to...
How are you investing in startups and you're betting on their scale?
Most startups don't need scale yet, but everyone wants resilience.
So you were saying you used O1. What was the previous prompt that you asked?
I got to India this past weekend and went Tiruvannamalai, and they had this big festival where everyone's walking around the holy mountains. They had this mantra that was being chanted, which was Om Namah Shivala. I had to look up what that meant. If I wasn't a cockroach, I think I would have had a...
So hi, Spencer. Welcome to India and welcome to Bangalore.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah. Spencer, can you tell me, I think let's kick off this podcast by saying that why Cockroach?
Why is it named Cockroach?
Yes, why is it named Cockroach? I want to understand the thought process. I mean, I've read about it, but I feel like it should come from you only. Why is it called Cockroach and why it has a close affiliation to India as well? What is the connection? Cockroach in India.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Cockroach was founded in New York, so we do have a problem with cockroaches there, but that's not why it's named that.
Okay.
If you were going to say one impressive thing about cockroaches, it's definitely that they're hard to kill, right?
Correct.
They're hard to get rid of. And, actually one of the things they said about World War III is that cockroaches would be the only things left alive, right?
Correct.
So that's actually why it's named that. It's the survivable database. And honestly, when we started thinking about the design, just the idea of cockroaches popped into my head. And this was way before thinking about building a company. It's just an idea. It's like, hey, this thing needs to be built.
Got it.
It's going to be a database that is very scalable. So you give it resources and it colonizes them, just like the bugs, right? And if something goes away, then the remaining resources will figure out how to re-replicate that missing data. And they're constantly optimizing, right? So that's why it's named that. Now, I don't know that I would have called it that if I was immediately starting a business, but since it was just an idea, this is a funny name. And now I've been in rooms with Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, with Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and had to talk about Cockroach. In both of those cases, though, those two guys knew about Cockroach already. So I was kind of explaining to other people in the room what it was. But I'll tell you this, people don't forget the name. So it's actually quite excellent. In terms of India, why it makes sense, India has a huge amount of scale. And that's one of the things that Cockroach is quite good at. And there's quite a bit of a focus in India, in banking sectors and tech companies and so forth, in actually having a very high standard for resilience, which is one of the key capabilities of Cockroach. So it's a natural additional market for us to enter. Of course, there's huge amounts of tech talent here. There's an incredible entrepreneurial mindset. And so the homegrown businesses that do everything from the equivalent of DoorDash or the equivalent of Netflix, you have all of those, but you have a 1.4 billion population.
Yeah.
And so it's a I think, very fertile ground for explosive growth over the next decade.
Got it. And also in India, there's a lot of cockroaches just in NY. Just for...
Hey, they're everywhere. That's actually, hopefully, that we true of our company and our database.
So it'll be synonymous very quickly here as well. So you've been CEO for the last 10 years. And I think in 2015, when you started with Peter and Ben, so you were a coder before and then you became a CEO. Just want to understand in the last 10 years that you've gone through, right? Just want to understand what were some of the biggest milestones that you've felt like, would you like to go back as a coder or would you like to be a CEO and running the business successfully? And it's very rare to find people with these two traits, who have been into coding and becoming CEOs. We have either seen very successful over the years, this transition is very difficult. So in the last 10 years, what are some of your milestones running this business for 10 years And now last 2 years, you've come to India and you're expanding here as well. It's beautiful to see that. So just want to know, what are some of your milestones that you count as achievements? And what are some of the hardship and regrets that you have? Or would you like to go back to coding, or would you like to do business?
And it's probably relevant for quite a few people that would listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a normal journey for an entrepreneur. I think one of the best ways to start a company is to solve a problem that you've got.
Correct.
As opposed to imagining someone else's problem, which you may or may not get right. You sure know your own problem, right?
Correct.
And one of my problems was definitely databases. And in fact, it's been one of my problems for as long as I've been working in the real world, so to speak. So I've been coding since I was like 12.
Correct.
Well, I should say I was coding since I was 12 because I don't code anymore.
Correct.
Because coding and the job I have today aren't really very compatible, at least for me personally. I know there are some CEOs that continue to code, but once I start coding, I never want to stop.
Correct.
I'll code on all my free time. And then if I'm supposed to be in a meeting, I'll be like, put the coding aside, go into the meeting. And meanwhile, I'm just thinking about what I was working on, because you just never stop as a software developer.
Correct.
And that was the thing I loved about it, and I always had a project. One of our biggest milestones, honestly, was just getting someone to really use Cockroach in production for the first time. And so when we started Cockroach, I was solving my own problem. I worked for at least 3 years solidly coding. Like I was very, very active in the code base. I was one of the bigger contributors. But at around 4 years, maybe, it started to become less and less viable. And to the point where people just did not want my changes anymore, because I wouldn't be around to support them. You know, I'd work on something really hard and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to submit this. And then bugs would come up, be like, I'm too busy. I got to go talk to an investor or something like that. So people would be like, we don't want your stuff. It's too hard for us to try to support it without you, working with somebody and having it completely handed off. So I just kind of moved away from there. But that was a huge milestone. That wasn't a very good milestone. I hated giving up coding, honestly. Wow. But getting someone to use it in production, getting our first dollar, and those are huge milestones, because for 3 years, we were building a product. Like we didn't have customers. And there was a point there where you start to wonder, well, will we ever have customers, you know?
Yeah.
I'm happy to report that we have a lot of them now, and the product's quite valuable to them. I think there was another really big milestone in there of just understanding that what it meant to be a CEO at around, 4, 5, 6 years into the business, when we started really adding lots of other functions, like a big go-to-market function, salespeople, like what does it mean to, then support a customer and get them to expand and so forth. And then how does the CEO role change when the business expands like that and you have all these new functions, and you realize some days is like when it all comes together, and it all makes sense. As a coder, every day makes sense, It's like you're building the thing, you're solving problems constantly, you're seeing it evolve in real time, and every day that you just did some good stuff, right? Wow. As a CEO, it's not always clear that you've done some good stuff. You're sitting in meetings after meetings and talking to people and interviewing people, and then at some point, some big thing happens for the company. You land a big account, or you hire someone really critical for the team, and you get a new investor, close a new round. Those kinds of things are when you feel like you've actually earned your pay, and all the rest of the time you're kind of wondering what's going on. So that's been very difficult, but also just kind of finding meaning in that is a big milestone. Like just, hey, it's another phase of my growth as an entrepreneur, also sort of as a human being, right? Like it's a different kind of management job. I'm glad I'm this kind of a manager, where I never really became a manager I was never an engineering manager. Like I was always more of a technical lead. I was like the most sort of leadership role I had. As a CEO, it's different from being a manager. It's more of like you're an aligner. You're helping everyone kind of hew to the same strategy. Yeah. But all the people that report to me, they know how to do their jobs way better than I know to do their jobs. Wow. Because I'm not trying to mentor them exactly, right? I do have to use them all to the best of my abilities to pull everyone into the same strategy and to figure out how to solve the problem. But it's a whole new set of challenges. So that's, I think, just the beginning of the milestones that we still have as a business. As much success as we've had, it's kind of sometimes you realize you're just at base camp, You still got the giant mountain ahead of you. So it's a good thing. And also, it's causes a little bit of vertigo
Okay.
when you look up at that mountain.
And coming back to your leadership style, right? So it has evolved from coding to become the CEO and successfully running the business. I think now the team has grown more than 500 plus. Do you call them cockroaches or
Call them roachers.
roaches? Okay. So 500.
Listen, if you have a name like that, you got to lean into it.
Yeah. So 500 roaches successfully spreading their wings everywhere and, going like, just want to know do you have a role model for yourself or your own role model, or do you look up to certain CEOs? If you would go on a particular date, a dinner date with particular CEO, who would that be?
That's pretty easy, actually.
Who is that?
I mean, it's not going to be a very original answer, but Elon Musk.
Wow, we just was talking about it.
I mean, he's like CEO of 6 companies or something like that all at once. Plus, he gets a president elected.
Wow.
And that's just kind of on the side,
Yeah.
And by the way, I ran into him at a wedding not too long ago.
Wow.
He was this super real, nice guy. It's like, what you see is what you get. He talked about all the same things he tweets about. There's kind of no difference.
Correct.
And he was extremely generous with his time. He just talked to anyone that wanted to come up and talk to him.
Yeah.
He never looked at his phone. He never seemed bored. He was just like, he's just full of energy and enthusiasm for what he does. And you just realize in order to run 6 companies, you have to be very intuitive and you have to be driven by beliefs. Like you have to have a vision for the future and just incredible investment of your belief in that vision. And then you can intuitively align things according to that. And you just, relying on people to do their jobs extremely well in sort of, concordance with that vision that you're able to paint. And that's his superpower. He believes.
And what is your mantra? Is it to sell that same CEO vision, or what is your leadership mantra or style like?
Well, it's, I guess, more than just leadership, but the belief we have is that our customers' success is the prerequisite for our success.
Beautiful. Yeah, talking about customer success, I mean, I was just going through your business model and everything. It's pretty unique compared to other databases companies out there, where you are actually investing in the startups and you're betting on their scale. That is sort of a model where they get the enterprise features once they scale. So why is that bet on? I mean, it's a very unique bet that I've seen in other databases, which is very unique to Cockroach there. Could you throw light on that? How are you investing in startups and you're betting on their scale? And also I want to know, what if once they scale, will they be with Cockroach forever, or will they switch to another database? How is that trust and scalability building in that aspect? Can you give some use cases?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let me expand on our strategy a little bit, because it is important. Where we actually make our money is at the very, very highest end of the market. Like,
Correct.
The huge banks, the global 2,000 companies out there. So we have a really strong focus in financial services and technology, SaaS, retail, gaming, like big multiplayer gaming things that are global, gambling. Yep. Those are some of the areas where we have a lot of strength right now in the market. On the startup side, we actually give our full enterprise product away for free.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's
a hit in India, by the way. Indians love free stuff. So.
and by the way, I mean, as someone that's done a few startups in my life, I definitely don't want to go argue about commercials and contracts. Correct. With any kind of vendor, right? Like I need to be able to use everything and download it and go to the races, right? Like I don't want anything holding me back or any kinds of protracted discussions and have to, God forbid, pay any money because you're not making any money, Okay. So the way we think of it is we want to give people the super enterprise experience. Most startups don't need scale yet in terms of the scalability of Cockroach, but everyone wants resilience.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And certainly what you'd like to do is build on a foundation that does allow you to become that big company, and then you still don't have to change your database. You can keep going. Right. So we give our product away until a company gets to $10 million in annual revenue. Until then, you're free to use everything and to really, and we have a level of support that we even provide for that. We think of that as an investment, right? We want companies to be able to scale and then not have to re-platform their system and then eventually become paying customers because we've helped make them successful. But what we want is we want to see all of our customers become those Global 2000. They want them to join that company of that scale. Those are really where you're going to need all of Cockroach's differentiators, which are elastic scalability. There's the extraordinary resilience that we have, and there's also a strong focus on where the data is going to be domiciled, and this helps with data sovereignty requirements. The customer fundamentally wants their data. It's for a banking application, let's say, in their legal jurisdiction. And if you're thinking about multiplayer games that are global, you actually want to deal with latency issues.
Okay.
You can't have all of your servers in one region and then access that globally. It's going to be horrible for many customers around the world. So those are all problems that Cockroach is great at solving. When a company becomes really big, those are often exactly the problems that they have to tackle.
Got it. So they stick with you throughout the journey.
That's the plan. We want to make their lives easy.
That's a hard bet, I feel like. But yeah, that's something I've not. Are there any examples in the history that has followed a similar step?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, listen. Let me just say this: we spend most of our effort going after these big strategic companies that really need Cockroach today, and it's on the sort of startup side. What we see is where people are really interested in Cockroach is because they're founded or they have an early employee that's like really a chief architect, and they're worrying about problems that the company might not even have yet.
Okay.
Right? And they're saying, like, this will be easier if we use Cockroach. We can use their cloud platform and not have to run this thing ourselves, or we can, run it ourselves, or we're running ourselves when we're doing our CI/CD and things like that. And so this is good that we have the exact thing that we're running in production, but we can do it on our laptops. So all those things work really well for a startup. But honestly, we don't spend a lot of time trying to make it the perfect thing for startups. What we find is that we have a self-selecting group of very ambitious startup founders that want to start with Cockroach. And that's great, right? I think that's probably a sample of people that are going to end up succeeding.
Beautiful. I think that's a very unique model that I've seen in the industry. Now coming to the competition, right? So coming to the hyperscalers and other data lakes and data aggregators, they're also getting into the similar service that Cockroach is getting into. I think this is a unique mode that you guys have, which you're believing in the philosophy and, you're going ahead with that. What competition do you face from, say hyperscaler? They also have I think Aurora is there, then Cosmos DB is there, then tons of the Google also has another name. So they all have different way to cater to the same requirements. So how do you draw that? I'm sure this is a question that is asked frequently by everyone and anyone. So just want to hear from you, what do you think? How do you differentiate yourself from the hyperscalers and also the ones, the SQL alternatives, for Cockroach DB alternatives? What is that one mode that you have which is can't be experienced or expected from either hyperscalers or your budding competitors or new Cockroach in the making?
Sure.
So yeah.
It's especially important to refer back to the strategy I discussed.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're really for these really scaled out companies.
Correct.
That in almost across the board uniformly, they are somewhat resistant to the kinds of vendor concentration risk.
Correct.
As something they want to avoid that would come with putting everything into one cloud vendor.
Correct.
And so the fact that Cockroach not only runs across all the different cloud vendors, and you can run it yourself that way, of course, you can also use our managed service, which is a whole cloud platform. There's different flavors of that. But you can move between the clouds. We have customers that are actually running Cockroach across the clouds actively. So they can turn off a cloud vendor completely and have complete business continuity, no downtime.
Got it.
Right? But they also, many of these big companies, they have private data centers still.
Yeah.
And this is true, of course, in India as well. In fact, many of the big banks and things don't want to move away from that.
Yeah.
Which is great, right? Because Cockroach runs everywhere, and that's also like the bug, right? And you see them everywhere.
Yeah.
That's an incredible strategic strength versus the hyperscalers, which are partners, by the way, in all of these endeavors. They're also competitors. They have many database products. But when you really get focused on what's our strategy, what's the kind of ideal customer profile look like? What do these customers want? They do want that cloud portability. They want the hybrid. They want to be able to run where their use cases need to run, whether that's for historical reasons or that's just where the first step for modernization is they eventually want to move to the cloud. But they want to do all that with no downtime on one consistent platform. And by the way, to consolidate, like how do we get off these old mainframes?
Okay.
I can't even find people that want to work on them anymore. It's just the technology is great, but it's just it's sunsetting. Right, so we want to run Cockroach next to the mainframe, and then we want to move it into the cloud, and then we want to go across the cloud. That's really the sort of journey that these bigger customers are looking at, and that puts us in a completely different class than the sort of walled gardens that the hyperscalers are providing in terms of database software.
Beautiful. Yeah, again, coming back to India, right? So this is your second visit, like you mentioned.
It's actually my third time.
Third time, okay. Sorry.
Just second with Cockroach.
Oh, second with
I came
Cockroach.
many years ago for a wedding.
Oh, wow. Okay. So coming back to India, right? So what is your vision for India here, right? So are you going to set up a R&D kind of facility here, or what is that India team or the Bangalore team here? What are your expectations from them, or to further scale this? So I'm asking this in line with particularly, say, from the kind of AI advancements that are happening, a lot of these new techniques that are coming. You have like RAG, vector DB, and also like a lot of even database layer is changing for the reasoning models. That's a different conversation that is happening.
Yeah.
What are your vision, like, for the next year, keeping India team? And what are your expectations, firstly, from the India team? What are you trying to build here, and how you want to scale? Second is your vision in terms of all the AI advancement that are happening, because in Bangalore and India, like that's the only talk that everyone's having.
Same in the States, believe me.
Oh yeah, same.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, listen, we're very excited about India. We started really with a more engineering focus.
Correct.
Obviously a huge talent pool, and many companies in the States have expanded using India. Well, think about the amazing benefits of that just from a language perspective.
Yeah.
And there's also the idea of like, hey, we did have companies that were customers already in APAC, and having that more complete coverage model where you're not having to page people in the middle of the night. That might be based in the US, but really having that global coverage, having an English-speaking country with the tech pool that India has is a huge advantage there.
Correct.
And the way we think about it is at first it was a little bit experimental. Like, is this going to work? Can we get the right, site director that can scale this, the right recruiters, and build an employer brand and things? So we really did start to tackle that in our first year. And then this past year has really been about scaling that. We're already at 55 people in India. And that goes across engineering, of course, which includes support, and it includes SREs that, run our cloud platform. And then we have multiple database and cloud engineering teams. The goal is to, in pursuit of that employer brand, is to really make the Cockroach Bangalore office a first-class engineering presence for us. Like, we want all the hard problems to be worked on here, and some of them kind of span between the U.S. and Toronto and India. But I think the model that works best is to find parts of the product and teams that can run wholly out of India, because it's easier not to have that 10.5-hour time zone coordination, right? So you want to build up the teams, have the right kind of technical leads, the right sort of hierarchy of leadership in India, so that the more and more of our most important projects can be tackled here. And that, of course, investing that way and making sure that the engineers that come to work in our India office have an opportunity for like incredible career advancement, and also to work on the hardest problems, the most interesting things, is, I think, a way to continue scaling and to make it so that we continue to add the highest caliber people to the team. In that process, in this past year, actually even before, we came to this conclusion that our go-to-market efforts ought to expand in APAC out of India as well. And that's not necessarily the most common pattern for companies historically, but I think it will probably become a lot more common just because of how friendly I think the environment is, especially when I talked about our strategy.
Yeah.
Like, are these big companies that have a need for elastic scalability, really need extraordinary resilience? I mean, well, this is a 1.4 billion, person population here.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have a bank, or you have a media company, or you have a grocery delivery service or logistics, huge potential. So they need that scalability, and also the regulation and the scrutiny here is very insistent on cross-cloud, multi-cloud, and extraordinary degree of resilience. And that fits very nicely into our value proposition for the product. So we actually feel like this is going to be the bulk of our APAC. And I think that'll be true of many companies. It's a little hard to do business in China, but for reasons of just a friendlier business climate here for a company that's based out of the United States primarily, but also just the language and cadence mismatch is just not there. So this is huge opportunity for us. And frankly, the companies here that are going to become customers, especially the ones that are the more strategic, larger customers, they absolutely want to see not just a local support team, but all local engineering that can do the escalations and come in and talk and be the design partners and things like that. So it fits in very nicely with our investment in engineering. And I think our go-to-market team is, I'm looking over someone off camera right now, that is our head of go-to-market here. It's almost as big as our engineering effort now. So it's expanding very rapidly. Now, you also asked about AI.
Yes, that's the climax there.
Listen, like the way I'd say about AI is Cockroach has not been, we didn't put AI after our name. We haven't been chasing around the ice rink, looking to hit the puck, the AI puck. But when that puck comes to us, we're going to smash it into the goal. Right? Because what Cockroach has is we have the operational database that provides all the things that these big companies really need to modernize all their existing things, to consolidate. Like we think of ourselves as not as an n+1 incremental database that you're adding, but as an n divided by 2. Okay. Like this is where you're going to shrink your databases over the next 10 years because it can do all the things that you can replace these legacy things and all the new things that you need to build. It's appropriate for both of those kinds of tasks. Right? Of course, you're going to put AI into all those use cases. Right? And there's this sort of historical, organic reason that most businesses put AI into their analytical stack. That's just sort of how things grow up. That's where the data science teams usually operate out of and so forth. But eventually, every business needs to operationalize that AI. You need the real-time flow of data. You need the complete consistency. So I think there's an opportunity for Cockroach really to be essentially the Databricks of the operational side of the house. Right, where you need to make sure that your AI system, let's say your vector similarity search and things like that, doesn't go down. Right, they can scale to 10 billion or 100 billion vectors. Yeah. Right, and even when you have like a vector capability that is limited, for example, to a customer ID or a merchant ID, let's say you're a SaaS business, still there's a power law distribution in there. Right, you're going to have many customers that are relatively small, and you can just do a brute force search, but then you're going to have a small number of customers that are massive, right, if your business succeeds. Like this happened at Google with AdWords. There are lots of small advertisers, but then they landed eBay. Yeah. And eBay didn't even fit onto one database shard. Well, Cockroach is providing a solution to that whole problem for vector indexing. You can put all of the vectors in and have a 10 billion vector search, or you can have lots of small indexes and then one customer that is, in the hundreds of millions or billions of vectors, and all of that just works with Cockroach. And it's resilient. And you can geo-partition the data so that you're only keeping those indexes where the data is supposed to be. Right, so it's all with your operational metadata. You can do the joining on it. So it's a very foundational solution for AI use cases once they hit production.
So you're going to call it Cockroach Intelligence or like?
I don't know that we have a specific, right now it's very boring. We have a PG vector, right? Cockroach looks like Postgres, so we follow that standard and that syntax. It's all about like the intelligence in the guts of the system. Like how does this stuff work? How does it scale? One way to think of it is our capabilities for AI, they stand on the shoulders of what Cockroach is bringing for operational capabilities. Right? They get all those same things, which by the way, take a decade to build. There's no way around that. Absolutely. Right? So you start a vector database and you still have to spend 10 years making it resilient and scalable and all those things. Right? So we're taking a resilient, scalable, geo-aware database and we're adding vectors into it, a very sophisticated vector capability.
Interesting. And I think your views on AI also, like if I have to visit some of the interviews, I think the conversation has now started. LLMs have hit a wall, data has hit a wall. I think Ilya Sutskever gave a talk in Neuro IPS recently, which said it's the end of pre-training era, right? So that is gone. The moat is gone. If you're building intelligence and all of that, I think it all comes down to data at the end of the day. So what is your view on, I think you were right all along, like these kind of models, it can't keep scaling for a higher this thing. So I just want to know your perspective in terms of, say, how much data is enough, or how much LLM scalability perspective. So that has hit a wall. So what are your views on that? And what could be the alternative scaling laws that you have come across? You've been a coder. I'm sure you'd be talking to a lot of people in terms of what are the right way of scaling or descaling, or, what should be the right path towards intelligence, or, your AGI or ASI or your whatever conflicts.
Now we're getting into areas that aren't really my specialty. So you're a layperson. Listen, as far as scale goes in operational databases, it is never really enough. And I think many businesses still believe that they can use a monolithic architecture in their database. In other words, like a legacy kind of database that scales up as opposed to scales out. I think that's going to get blown out of the water with AI, right? Because these vectors aren't small. And the reality is you could keep a vector for every single interaction you have with a particular business entity, depending on your use case, which could be hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or millions of vectors for every single customer you have. Right? I mean, we're talking about absurd potential for new scale, and there's all kinds of ways to quantize those and shrink them down. But the reality is that if you can put more data into an operational database to improve the experience for the customer, there shouldn't be anything that prevents you from doing that, except for cost.
Okay.
Right, and you can improve cost better, but like you don't want a database that says, "Ooh, that's going to push it over which is how most of these databases are right now. Okay, well we're gonna put this into another system that only handles the vectors, and that one, only gets up to this size, and now you've got new points of failure and linkages that can break and things that are stale. So you're greatly increasing the complexity. If you can put that all into an operational system of record, to the extent that you can improve your use case and improve the customer value in a way that balances cost, then of course you want to be able to do it. You don't want any technical prohibitions on that. And so I think there's, AI in general, it's getting cheaper. I think it's getting less, there's less a need for massive quantities of data, more for the quality, more for how the model works, right? More for how you're constructing like the prompt that you give in terms of like a RAG type application. Like people are getting better and better at these things, and the cost, by the way, is like cratering compared to what it was previously. I think all those things will move in the direction, but listen, everything I've seen in 30 years of working in the world of computer science is that whatever new capabilities there are, whatever drop in cost, all that does is create more demand.
Wow.
Right? More scale is required. It's not less. It's just that the less expensive means that you can apply the intelligence everywhere. Like ways that people aren't even considering now. Like, okay, you can quantize the vectors and massively drop how much it takes to, say, store 1,500 floating point numbers. And okay, that's great. Now let's store like, 100,000, 10,000 times as much of those. Like that's just going to be the inevitable consequence. So, in terms of like people losing their jobs and all those fears about AI, this gives more leverage. AI is a tool. It'll give human beings more leverage. And so you're just going to do more with the resources you have, which doesn't mean that you're just going to do the same things, but with less human beings. It just now you can do 10 times more things with the same number of human beings, or maybe you're going to want more human beings because now you can do things that nobody even imagined before. That's I think the direction this stuff's going. I don't particularly think that we're in much danger of real AGI, which I'd define as the AI being as competent as a human at everything. I think that's a misunderstanding of human consciousness. And but these things are more and more powerful tools that give leverage to humans. And ASI would kind of follow the same kind of path of reasoning. Like if the AGI can't truly do the things that humans can do, like intuitive leaps that go beyond what the data, the patterns in the data, even hidden patterns can specify, then the ASI, we're not going to have these things, hey, we won't have the need for anything human anymore. That seems like a bit of a pipe dream, at least in terms of what LLMs are capable of.
Got it. And so coming to the usage of AI, do you use it on a daily basis? Have you seen any productivity increase on a day-to-day basis? And which is your go-to AI tool or AI platform that you use on a day-to-day basis? For me, it's Cloudy and between ChatGPT. So I have like two.
What was the first one?
Cloudy, that is Anthropic's Cloudy.
Claude. Okay.
Yeah, Claude. So Claude and Chat.
People say Claude is way better for coding. That's what our internal.
So it's like a two window you have, and your artifacts you can cross check. So I think the world is evolving. So you become productive with Claude, and ChatGPT becomes smart. So they're like two brains at the same time. So what
I like the O1 model in ChatGPT.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, I found that that's actually pretty good at doing things that the older models weren't really capable of.
Wow.
I've also used Grok 2 a bit. I think I think Grok 2 is going to get really good in certain ways because it's going to be fed all of X.com's real-time data. That's an incredible advantage.
Yeah.
You can imagine that Google also has some incredible structural advantages, as does Facebook or Meta. Yeah, I mean, all these, like the open source models are moving along very rapidly as well, and they have their own incredible advantages. One thing seems to be true. I don't know if you saw that Mark Andreessen, Joe Rogan podcast.
Okay.
But Mark Andreessen is this big VC, Andreessen Horowitz in the States. He said in this podcast, whatever, it's hard to say whether it's actually true, but the Biden administration was previously saying that don't even fund these AI companies because we're only going to allow like 2 or 3 of them to really exist because we can't have runaway foundation models and things.
Wow.
That was like the U.S. government like saying no to innovation. And by the way, they did the same thing to crypto. They just debanked crypto founders. This is what Andreessen said. That's insane, right? Yeah. But that's about to end. So what does that mean for AI? I mean, it means that I don't think the things that everyone's been holding true as there's been like Anthropic and ChatGPT and Google and then Facebook kind of Meta doing their own things with open source stuff. I think the ecosystem could go wide open, as I expect crypto to find a real resurgence as well. So it's hard to say what the future is going to be like. I've seen, to your earlier question, some productivity gains.
Okay.
They're not huge, but what you can do with AI, and I'm sure that this won't be news to anyone that's listening to this, is it gives you this amazing first draft.
Correct.
And then you can tell it like, that sucks. Give me something better, right? And it goes back and it gives you something better. It's actually quite good at that. You have to challenge it. If you can't prove its work, then you can't rely on it. That's for sure. So like AI right now, at least, doesn't really give you good results if you don't know what you're talking about. Absolutely. But if you do, then it can make your process lots faster, a lot faster.
So you were saying you used O1. What was the previous prompt that you asked? If I may ask.
I don't have my phone right now.
Yeah, I can recall like what was the funniest thing because now.
Oh, you know what it was? Actually, I mentioned this to you before we started the conversation, but I got to India this past weekend and went to Tiruvannamalai, which is where Ramana Maharshi's ashram is. And they had this big festival where everyone's walking around the holy mountain, and on the loudspeakers they had this mantra that was being chanted, which was Om Namah Shivala.
Correct. Yeah.
And I had to look up what that meant, and it gave me actually a pretty good description. It's like surrender to the divine. It means bow to Shiva, literally. And it actually had some. I found that I have a sort of interest in spiritual traditions and history and meanings. And the AIs are really quite knowledgeable about spiritual matters. Wow. That is one thing they're actually very good at. And they don't seem to hallucinate much. So you can ask them really anything about your interest in that direction. And they seem to not be spouting nonsense or hallucinations. I think it's because there's a lot of consistency and a lot of like human output and commentary on these things. But it has a lot of good training material.
Got it. So one last joke, I think after that, I'll just take a final message from you. So the joke is, why did AI have trust issues?
I'm not sure.
It didn't have a relational database. So yeah, that's the one.
Well, we'll aim to provide them with one.
Yeah, that's what Cockroach is, where you have to go like, yeah, then we won't have trust issues for AI systems. Right?
Yeah, I was actually in this interesting investor conference for one of our investors, and I was invited to go to give some little presentation, and they were very high on the AI terms, like everyone was smoking AI. It was really crazy. At one point, someone was asking this question. I think Databricks is up on the stage of like, well, do you think that we don't even need databases anymore? Because the models can just learn, kind of like your brain. They're like, well, if you don't mind your bank account balance maybe being kind of right, then sure. But I think there's always going to be room for databases. So I think the right way to think of it is Cockroach has the potential for operational use cases to really give these things accurate memory.
Yeah. That's interesting. And just quick, before I ask the final message, what are your quick predictions for 2025 that you have? And you can tell me what areas do you see changing in the next coming year?
Well, one that we're very excited about is this idea of bring your own cloud. So traditionally, we've thought about our business as a dichotomy between, on one hand, customers that run the database themselves, and many big companies that they still insist on that.
Yeah.
And they may be private data centers, or they might be hybrid, wherever they want to run it, or in the public cloud. They'd say, hey, we don't want you having this account access to our data, and so we're going to learn how to run the database. Well, that can be an expensive proposition, right? So those customers might not expand as quickly because it takes them longer to get into production and to learn, and they have to hire people that will run the system and be educated on it. On the other hand, we have our cloud platform, right? Which would be great if that's what everyone wanted. But when the really high end of the market, a lot of people still want self-hosted. So we had this dichotomy.
Correct.
Right? And bring your own cloud is the potential maybe to collapse that, treat it as a false dichotomy. So the idea of us orchestrating the cluster actually can coexist with them owning the data and having it in their account or in their own cloud. And it's a bit more complexity in there. But there's this potential to make everything cloud in terms of how quickly and efficiently a customer can get up to speed and actually get time to value.
Amazing. So that's any more prediction like in memory? I think Mustafa Sulaiman also was saying that in memory would be the next with reasoning models like O1 and all of that. Like there would be a shift in how say test time compute is happening on the infrastructure layer, but on the database layer, you're going to see a huge change in that layer in terms of how, like you mentioned, there's no downtime, less latency, and how do you manage your entire database layer on top of the AI application layer. So I think next year a lot of people are predicting like AI native apps coming, which has, the database layer would have a massive role to play in terms of how do you help in those areas as well. So are you seeing that area also in memory, kind of a thing you mentioned in passing?
And that sounds really cool. That will probably be limited to the fringes of the fastest moving new startups and things. Like causal AI, I don't know if you've heard about that. That's the next big thing. It's like, generative AI, that's old fashioned, right? Yeah. Before anyone even makes money, they're like, no, it's causal AI.
Agentic AI is another area which people are talking about, like they're talking about agentic RAG. So, those are some of the...
It's kind of like they replace the new hotness before the old hotness actually managed to make any money. So
Got it.
You kind of wonder, like, where this is all going. But actually, I think this year ahead for AI, you'll have all these new things that are very exciting. But it's more like, can these really the bread and butter use cases that are where these bigger companies make their money, can they really successfully deploy AI? Where you put intelligence into the product experience? I think that's going to start to really get rolled out in 2025, which would be great because a lot of money has been spent on AI. And one of the persistent criticisms of the whole, wonderful new world of AI is just like, wow, people are spending trillions of dollars on the data centers and the GPUs.
Yeah.
And nobody's making $1 trillion except for, NVIDIA is doing quite well there, right? But, the total amount spent and the total amount made, there's a vast delta there.
Yeah.
So when does this start to pay off? Where's the ROI? And I think 2025, we're either going to start to see that or people are going to start to wonder whether it's ever going to materialize as the people keep finding crazy new things to do. But does it all come back to profitable experience for the customer?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So on a final note, what is your final message to the developer ecosystem and the viewers that are watching, right, from Cockroach? What is your vision that you feel like the next decade is going to be Cockroach decade? Or in the database itself, it's a $120 billion market. everyone has a unique role to play, and you guys are innovating on the relational database side. Like there is no tomorrow, and you're betting on that, and plus you're betting on startups and growing together. So 10 years from now, what is a message to everyone out there? Like, yeah.
Well, hopefully, yeah, if you're listening to this and you're not already working at a big company, if you are, you should talk to Cockroach for sure.
Okay.
But if you want to build one of those, think about building on Cockroach because we do hope that all of these new starts, especially the ones in AI that have potential to go from 0 to $1 billion in shorter than any company has ever done in history. Right? That potential is all there. Start on Cockroach, but if you do build that huge success, you're gonna need Cockroach. That's like the 10-year horizon. Like all of these, we'd like to continue our strategy and really win at the highest end of the market. And of course, that's not just about the product we have today. Cockroach will be a fundamentally different and more impressive product in 10 more years. So like there's going to be a tremendous amount of innovation from here to there. And I think that's an important aspect of choosing the database today, right? Like there might be things that are legacy that are on the market that are inexpensive that absolutely can do what you realize your business needs today. But what your business needs in 5 years, in 10 years, is going to require a platform that can consistently innovate to keep up with that.
Amazing. Thank you, Spencer. That was wonderful. Just one last question.
Yeah.
Spencer, if you were not a CEO of Cockroach, or what would you be? Like if you're working in Google, so how would your life be without Cockroach?
Well, I don't know if I could ever have still been working at Google. When I started at Google, it was 300 people.
Okay.
And when I left, it was 30-something thousand.
Wow.
And now I think it's like 300,000, like orders of magnitude going up. At somewhere around 30,000, I had to tap out. That was a little too big for me.
Got it.
If I wasn't, if I wasn't at Cockroach, I think I would have had to find something else to do. At this point, it might be I'd be one of those sannyasis.
Wow.
That's traveling around trying to find God. That seems to be like I'm getting to that stage in life.
Beautiful. I hope you found one. I think you are the God. Yeah, thank you, Spencer. Lovely.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.